Joining us now, Melissa Murray, former law clerk to Judge Sonia Sotomayor and an MS Now legal analyst, along with Leah Littman, law professor at the University of Michigan and the author of Lawless. Leah and Melissa, both co-hosts of the Strict Scrutiny podcast. Also with us, Andrea Flores, founder of Securing America's Promise and former DHS official and White House advisor in the Obama and Biden administrations, along with Amanda Carpenter, writer and editor at Protect Democracy. Melissa, what is at stake with these rulings?
Well, everything is at stake in these rulings. As Justice Sotomayor said in her dissent here, this is absolutely catastrophic and consequential. More people will die at the border. This is part of a bigger trend, Alicia. Over the course of the last week, the courts issued a number of rulings. They all amount to one basic thing. Regardless of whether Congress has enacted statutes that provide certain legal protections for various groups, those protections are effectively nullified and unenforceable under these courts' rulings. They are basically parchment promises. We have an asylum law that basically guarantees that individuals seeking asylum will not be turned away from the United States. That was passed in the wake of the Holocaust and the fact that we did once turn away asylum seekers from Nazi Germany, and those people died horrible deaths at the hands of the Third Reich. We were trying to not repeat those mistakes. Now the court has effectively said, if the United States government artificially imposes limits on those who may enter the United States seeking asylum each day, if you are on the other side of the border, right at the U.S. border, if you have not been admitted, you cannot go forward and seek asylum, despite the fact that those statutory protections for asylum seekers exist. On Tuesday, they issued a decision in a case involving a statute that protects the religious rights of prisoners, that those rights are not enforceable if prison officials do not consent first to be bound by those laws, which, of course, no prison official would do. So the court is taking these protections that Congress has provided and effectively nullifying them and rendering them unenforceable.
Andrea, the TPS decision that we're talking about, it related specifically to protections for Syrians, for Haitians. How long before it affects those who came here from El Salvador?
I think we're expecting a decision soon, and it will be devastating because El Salvadorian TPS holders have been here since the early 1990s. And so the TPS population it's large, it's well established in our communities. To get TPS, you have to come forward every 18 months to be vetted. And these are people who contribute $6 billion to our economy every single year. And so President Trump must be feeling enormous pressure from the business community, because today's decision means that 1.3 million people are at risk of losing their legal status. And so that could be the biggest delegalization moment we've ever seen in modern immigration history.
Leah, listen, I'm not an attorney. That's why I have three attorneys on this panel. But reading the ruling, reading the dissent, it felt a little bit to me like the justices were hiding behind judicial review. They weren't actually willing to contend with the core question here. Specifically, immigration advocates had argued that terminating TPS was motivated by race. It violated the right to equal protection. The conservative justices absolutely rejected that argument. The liberal justices vehemently disagreed. This is from Justice Kagan about Trump's derogatory comments about Haitians. The statements fairly shout, in their racial undertones and overtones alike, that race entered into the president's resolve to remove Haitians from this country. Your thought on the majority opinion?
I think we should read this majority opinion as effectively legalizing the president's gutter racism. The court basically plugged its ears and closed its eyes. It wasn't just the president's attorneys who refused to recite the president's remarks at the Supreme Court. The majority of the court that upheld the president's cancellation of TPS for Haitian nationals also refused to recite the remarks that the president had made. And those remarks were grotesque and filthy. The president talked about how Haitians would poison the blood of the country. If that's not a racist remark, I'm just not sure what is. So Justice Kagan, for the Democratic appointees, included the president's remarks in her dissent and basically accused the majority of being too cowardly to even acknowledge them. And this is just another case of the court giving the president a free pass for racism.
Amanda, we talked yesterday about Stephen Miller's latest tweet. Can we put it up on the screen? Change the voters, change the country. We also, after all of this reporting about how he was getting sidelined at the White House, he showed up with the president yesterday to Capitol Hill for his meeting with Senate Republicans. He was lurking just over his shoulder. I mean, this is his dream, rubber stamped and set in motion by the Supreme Court.
You know, it's a really good point. It is wild that the court doesn't take into account the context in which they try to pass these laws. Like, they go into this hermetically sealed chamber and say, we will ignore all of the racism, all the dog whistles, all the things they're trying to do out in the open that we all see, and evaluate this as this is like an ice skating competition. But, you know, I always just think back to all the Republicans that said people had to support Trump because these things would never happen. Stephen Miller will never be running White House immigration policy. We'll never have the National Guard deployed through the cities to do whatever, like monitor and arrest people at reflecting pools. We won't have ICE agents dragging people out of their houses. All of this is happening. And yet, again and again, the conservative Supreme Court keeps handing this president more and more power, ignoring the context of everything that's happening. And it's just really hard to square as someone who cares about limited government, because it would be one thing if we just wanted to talk about the unitary executive theory and how it's good in the abstract. But we don't have like a benevolent president who's working in the best interest of the country. Again and again, he abuses his power to advance these radical and extreme goals and enrich himself and his allies.
I'm thinking, Andrea, about the point you made about Salvadorans having been here since the 1990s. I think a lot of us live in communities where the people we're talking about are our neighbors and our friends. And if you think about someone who came here in the 90s as an adult, that means they have U.S.-born children. It means they have started businesses here. It means they own homes here. It means they are deeply woven into the fabric of this country. One immigration advocate texted me today and said about the TPS ruling, well, the Roberts Court has absolutely decimated Miami's healthcare system, right? The number of workers, the way in which we rely on, we're not talking about undocumented people here, Andrea. We're talking about people who had status. This is the largest delegalization effort in the modern era.
That's right. I mean, the Supreme Court conveniently just ignored any real-life impact, which they often do when it comes to issues of immigration and issues related to race. And here they ignored the fact that Haitians are some of the, most common caregivers in our community. So you just think of the American families today who are going to have to fire their elder care workers, child care workers. Think about communities, I think about in states like Pennsylvania, in Ohio. I mean, the Haitian community is part of the fabric of our nation because we have been providing TPS to Haiti since the 2010 earthquake, right? We're talking about people who've lived here for now over 15 years. And I think people need to sit back and recognize that what could happen now is what will be required to deport these people will need, you'll see ICE agents going to communities again. I just want to say, to deport this many people will require more state action and more federal force. And that is what the Supreme Court is also unleashing today, which means more racial profiling of predominantly Black and brown communities and more deployments. And so you can't disconnect the fact that first it hits the economy, it hits employers, it hits families, and then it's going to hit American citizens, both through their cost of living and also through the fact that there's going to be more immigration enforcement to carry out removing 400,000 people to Venezuela, 300,000 people to Haiti, 6,000 people to Syria. I mean, and that is just only 3 countries on the list of people who have TPS right now.
Melissa Murray, I'm thinking about these decisions side by side, right? TPS deals with people who are already in the interior of this country, people who have roots here. The asylum case is much more about future flow. It is about people who would want to come to this country. It also, though, I think begs an existential question about who we are and who we want to be as a country. Justice Sotomayor, your once boss, read a nearly 12-minute long dissent from the bench in the asylum-seeking case. She called it, quote, egregiously wrong, drew comparisons to refugees that arrived after World War II. If the court is saying that refugees have not arrived in the United States by showing up at the U.S.-Mexico border, and therefore they cannot claim asylum, doesn't that then just incentivize more people to cross the border however they can?
Well, it incentivizes a number of things. It incentivizes this administration to put artificial limits on those who can enter the country, because the court has essentially said, if you are not physically in the United States' office, if you're at the border and you've been prevented from coming in, then you cannot apply for asylum. And it is, as you say, an incentive to those seeking admission to this country to just use whatever means are at their disposal to do so, to not try and do this the lawful way by seeking asylum. And again, we have to underscore that point. This isn't a question of undocumented immigration. These are people who have a statutory right under statutes that Congress, our representatives, enacted, allowing for those who are in situations in their home countries where it is unsafe for them to come to the United States seeking asylum. And we are effectively authorizing this administration to say that we can turn them away, we can limit the number of people who can seek asylum at any given time, and we can do that for as long as the administration believes that it is necessary to do so. They don't have to justify it. They don't have to account for it. They don't have to do anything with regard to dealing with how this statute is enforced. They get to make the rules, and it is going to lead to more unlawful immigration. It's going to lead to a lot of people being unsafe in the situations that they're in, and this country no longer being a refuge for them.